In this video, we will solve scenarios using unit rate. In particular, we're going to be looking at the spicy veggies activity that we did in class, and we're going to use two different strategies to solve that problem. So we have a restaurant, and they make a special seasoning for all their grilled vegetables. Here is the list of all of the ingredients. It says they have half of the mixture is salt, 1/4 of the mixture is pepper, an eighth is garlic powder, eighth is onion powder. You probably notice that there's a couple things going on with these fractions. First, they're all unit fractions. They're all with a numerator of 1. And the second thing I notice is that their denominator increases sort of by 2 each time. That means I'm dividing by 2 as I go down the mixture here. So there's two ways that we can look at it. One is sort of to look at the recipe itself and say, okay, how am I moving down each time on the recipe? So I put a box around this as my original recipe. And the second way I saw it was to look at it as I move from the recipe to the batch. So I'm going to call from the recipe to the batch the sort of the Ms. Hawkins way, because that's sort of how I initially saw it. And I'm going to call from the recipe just sort of going down vertically the Mr. Hebert strategy, because that's sort of how he talked about it in class. All right, so we have 1 cup of salt. So let's start with my strategy for this one. I noticed that I went from 1/2 to 1 cup of salt, right? And so I'm going to assume that this is half, and I'm just going to put cups, that they were talking about cups here. So how did I go from 1/2 to 1? Well, I had to multiply it by 2, so it doubled. The recipe doubled in batch 1. So I'm going to double everything. I multiply 1/4 times 2, or 2 over 1. That would give me 2/4, or 1/2. If I multiply 1/8 times 2 over 1 again, I get 2/8, which is the same as 1/4. And garlic powder and onion powder are equivalent, so I should have 2/8 or 1/4 here too. And here I'm going to use the other strategy, which Mr. Hebert mentioned in class, and that is to sort of go down vertically. So here I notice I have 1. So I have 1/4 to 1. So each time I have to sort of divide or multiply by 2. So looks like I need to multiply by 2, because here I multiplied by 2. So 1 times 2 is 2. And if I divide as I go down, well, 1 divided by 2 would give me 1/2. And these two are equivalent, so it would also be 1/2. And I noticed in class a lot of you preferred this as a strategy, because you just sort of use that 1 instead of having to go back to your recipe. You just knew that you were either multiplying or dividing by 2. So if I multiply by 2, again using this to go up, that means I would have to multiply this by 2 as well. So that means this is 4 times the original recipe. So hopefully that makes sense using the second strategy. I probably should have used a different color, but you can see that this was a different way to look at it. Now I'm going to go back and use the second way, or the first way we did it, starting with the original recipe and then looking at the numbers provided and seeing how I go from 1/8 to 1. Well, if I use that multiplicative inverse, right, I need to multiply 1/8 times 8 to get 1, or 8 over 1. That means everything in this part has to be multiplied by 8. So 1/2 times 8 is 4. 1/4 times 8 is 2. And 1/8 times 8 is 1 and 1. So these all kind of make sense. Okay. Now the last thing we need to do is calculate our totals. This was similar to our going on the hike problem, where we had to add up our totals and then figure out what each batch was, or each the hiker weight, the total, the backpack weight, and the total weight combined. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to add up all of my ingredients by cups and figure out what that total amount is. So let's do for this one. 4 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1. Indeed, I do get 8 cups here. So I'm going to just change that to 8 cups. Half plus another half is 1 whole, plus 1 plus 2. It just looks like this is by coincidence. I have 4 cups. And let's see, a fourth plus a fourth is half plus another half plus 1. I get 2. So always you could pause it if it's going too fast. Now I did that because the second part of this activity gives us our total amount of cups. So I have my 12 cups. So I need to figure out what is the relationship, the multiplicative relationship, like we've been talking about, between my 2 cups total and my 1 cup of salt. So I want to divide. And I'm going to see if that is consistent across. So 2 divided by 1 is 2. 4 divided by 2 . 4 divided by 2 is 2. And 8 divided by 4 is 2. So what is 12 divided by 2? It's 6 cups. So we already got our salt by just simply dividing 12 by 2. Now let's divide our 6 by 2. And again, we're using that other strategy now of sort of going down and dividing by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 divided by 2 is 1½ cup and 1½ cup. Right, those were the same. And if I add all these up, I would indeed get 12 cups. All right, hope this helps.